Councillors, officers and members of the public, welcome to the Wednesday the 13th of December 2023 Development Assessment Committee. I will now open the meeting with the present and apologies. Here we go. Just on time. We have all councillors in attendance tonight, so there are no apologies to the meeting. Item 3, recording of minutes. In accordance with Moorabool Shire Council's governance rules, the Council will be recording and live streaming this meeting. Item 4 and 5, confirmation of minutes and matters arising from previous minutes. Councillors, are there any matters arising from the previous minutes? Nope.
Madam Chair, I would actually move that the previous meeting minutes be received, please.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Any dissent? All those in favour? Carried. Item 6, disclosure of conflicts of interest. Councillors, does anyone have a conflict of interest to declare in tonight's agenda? Councillor Tatchell.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor. Item 7.3, which is the manufactured storage packaging manufacturers. You understand? One of my companies does it.
Thank you, Councillor Tatchell. Yes, Councillor Berry. Was the mic not on?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can we just make sure councillors put their microphones on, please? Can't hear. Thank you.
Councillor Tatchell, do you just want to repeat what you just said?
Say it again?
Yes, thank you.
Right, item 7.3, one of my companies does the work for the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tatchell. I'll just note that here so I don't forget. Where is 7.3?
The paperwork's here, Madam Mayor, if you want.
Thank you. All right. So at the commencement of that item, Councillor Tatchell, I'll just ask you to leave the chambers when we come to that. Thank you.
For the first time.
Okay, item 7, community planning reports. So we have, we will move to item 7.1, the use and development of a childcare centre at 113 Masons Lane, Bacchus Marsh. We have two speakers to this item. I will first call Chris Neeson. Chris Neeson has registered to speak to this item. Mr. Neeson is online. Oh, he's in. Oh, all right. Oh, no, sorry. Didn't turn my page over. There we go. In person. Thank you, Chris. Yep. So we just press this button. Now, Mr. Neeson, we have 3 minutes. Yes. And after those 3 minutes, I will open the floor for councillors to ask any questions.
Yes, all right.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak as an objector to this planning application. I'm going to go straight to the issues that I found, or my wife and I found. It's in regards to the traffic impact assessment report. The impact assessment report sort of had the following issues. The description of the roadwork network does not account for the significant narrowing of Masons Lane as a result of the new shared pedestrian bike path from Bacchus Marsh Aqualink project. Another point that we have, local traffic is not assessed at all, rather an assumption made that is likely to be low. Next point I have, the parking availability in the locality was assessed on Tuesday the 24th of January 2023 during summer school holidays and in the same week as the Australian Day holiday. Hardly a typical morning for this local area. Next point, the spot parking survey significantly overstates the availability of local area on-street parking, highlighting all areas in the vicinity of the site but failing to omit sections which are prohibited by unbroken centre lines or contains driveways or where parking on both sides of the street would severely impinge on traffic flow. Point 5, the data from the example childcare centres used as the basis for parking demand profiles is 15 years out of date and corresponds to a much lower educator to child ratios for this time. Therefore, it can only provide a qualitative assessment of the parking demand. In terms of the actual site plan for the development, we have the following concerns. The plan for the on-site parking within the development itself allows for 15 typical car spaces. National Quality Framework educator to child ratios, as proposed, split the age groups within the centre means there is a requirement for a minimum of 12 staff, not including non-educator staff, to be on site during the centre operations. Depending on the age of the children present at any one time, this minimum could be triggered by as few as 50 children. Therefore, virtually the entire car park could be occupied with staff cars for the large portion of the day. Next point, the swept analysis indicates that cars would need to reverse through parking area back towards incoming traffic if there is no parks available. Next point, waste collection for the centre at the point located at the far end of the proposed car park could only be achieved if 4 specific spaces within the on-site car park were vacant at the time. Number 4, the demographic of the area immediately surrounding the subject site is a mix of mostly older, retired household and residents that work at least partially from home. The proposed hours of the operation for this childcare centre are 6:30 to 18:30 every weekday for presumably almost 52 weeks of the year. There has been no effort in the planning application to address the impact of the noise on the surrounding residential area. The proposal notes the noise reduction is achieved through landscaping, screening and fencing, but fails to detail how any of these features will actually mitigate noise.
Mr Nissen, unfortunately, you've reached your 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Was there any closing short comment that you would like to make? Or
I'll just read this last paragraph out. In summary, the proposed location of the development would have an adverse impact to ourselves and other residents due to the significant increase in traffic volume and on-street parking needs in a already busy intersection. With the recent and future road networks changes arising from the aqueduct projects, plus the increase in access demands from changes to be made under the Mason Lane Reserve Renewal Project, the additional pressure on this local road system due to the pressure of the childcare centre will surely impact the safety of the area and the residents who live there in the vicinity.
thank you, Mr Nissen.
Thank you.
Councillors, do we have any questions for Mr Nissen? Councillor Ward.
Yes, thanks, Madam Mayor. Thanks, Mr Nissen, for that presentation. There's just a couple of things I just want to seek clarity on. You mentioned that Mason's Lane had been narrowed.
Yep.
From my recollection, it was always single lanes either way. The footpath has been widened to encourage more pedestrian traffic, which to help alleviate the traffic in Mason's Lane. I'm sure it was single lane either way, but you mentioned it had been narrowed.
Yeah, it had been narrowed. Prior to the actual traffic assessment, or when the traffic assessment report was done, Mason's Lane could accommodate 2 cars. When they put the bicycle lane in, they narrowed the road effectively. I don't know exactly the dimensions. I think we roughly took dimensions of how, but say half a metre had been narrowed. So now what happens is, so when that traffic assessment report had been done, the bicycle lane hadn't been put there. Now it has been put there. So the traffic conditions have changed. 2 vehicles parked on either side of the road effectively makes that road a single lane traffic. So you have to now start rat running.
Councillor Ward.
Thank you. So, Madam Mayor, my experience of putting 3 kids through childcare and doing the pickups and the drop-off is that a large proportion of the parents would avail themselves of that fantastic footpath, so that would alleviate the need for everyone to take a vehicle. I'm interested though, just picking up on something else that you said. You mentioned about the concerns being addressed. I was actually pleased, and one of the first things I ever look for in any application, I don't know the applicant here, is that after objections were received, the applicant reduced the capacity of the childcare centre and included an additional car parking space, which removed the request for a car parking reduction. So I thought that was commendable, but
Point
of order.
We're
Councillor
asking a
Tatchell.
question, or are we debating?
Are you asking?
No, I was in the middle of the question, but that's okay.
It's a very long
to
question,
it.
Madam Mayor. It's a very long
Okay.
question.
Do you want to get to your point, Councillor Ward? Thank you.
Yeah, no, just laughing at the irony. I think my recollection of Masons Lane is, and I've had, I've been down there on Saturday mornings when athletics have been on and 2 cricket games have been on and dog training's been on and baseball's been on, and on a Monday to Thursday night when you could have 5, 6, 7 or 8 football sides training down there doing their pre-season training. When would be the optimal time to measure?
Now we're bordering on a speech.
Councillor
When
Wood,
would
Councillor Wood, I need you to get to your question. Thank you.
I actually had started to say what would be the optimal time to measure the traffic. Would it be a Saturday morning? Would it be an evening? Would it be during the day? Because I'm not sure when the optimal time would be, because my experience is...
Well,
Mr.
according to your traffic assessment report, the best time to actually monitor it is Tuesday the 24th of January 2023 on Australian Day. So that doesn't seem to be like a typical day. And in regards to your comment about most people taking their kids and walking them to the daycare, I wouldn't expect that at all. I would think that most people would be driving their kids to that daycare centre. I don't know, they come from a vast area. I don't see how you could say that it would be just walking and riding to... I'm sure that there would be some, but to say that in entirety that most of them would just walk or ride doesn't...
No, I didn't say entirety at all.
Thank you, Mr Neeson. Was there any other questions from councillors? No? Thank you, Mr Neeson. You can...
Yes.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Berry. I didn't see your hand. Councillor Berry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr Neeson, you did mention the survey done on the, in your speech, you didn't, in your speaking, you didn't say the 24th of January. So the 24th of January, that is still school holidays, is that correct?
Yes. So that would not be a typical day, school day.
Thank you, Mr Neeson. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor. Mr Neeson, thank you for answering those questions, and you can take a seat in the gallery. Thank you
very much.
Councillor Dudzik.
Can I ask a question of officers?
Yes, of course.
Through the chair, is it considered acceptable to do a traffic management statement in the assessment, in the school holiday periods? Is that considered an acceptable study?
Mr Bezet now.
Ask Mr Lavelle to answer.
So through the chair, they do select a particular day to do a traffic impact assessment. There will, of course, be days where there are higher volumes or lower volumes of traffic, but our traffic engineers did review the report and they were looking at the data behind it, and they are aware of other, developments that have happened in the area, and they've got a general idea of the traffic that is accompanying these local roads.
Thank you, Mr Lavelle. Okay, so we'll move on to our next speaker. Mr Peter Veal has registered to speak to this item. Mr Veal? Thank you, Mr Veal. Please take your seat. The microphone is already on, so you don't have to turn that on.
No worries. Thank you very much.
You'll have the 3 minutes, and after that, councillors will be able to ask you questions. Thank you.
No worries. I sent in, did a road report myself. I sent in with Mike earlier for a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Some nights between 4:30 through to 5 o'clock, and then 4:30, 5 o'clock through to 6:30. Number of cars coming in all directions. I put down each way, coming from Young Street into Mason Lane, Young Street, south or east or west. A lot of footballers this time of year. They get there around 5 o'clock. I've got photos of them. There'll be at least 40 or 50 blokes, and they all come in their own cars, and then there's all the people that run around down there with dogs. I lived opposite at 71 Young Street. My boundary runs right to where the gate's going to be. I've been there 13 years. The amount of traffic that Mason Lane and Young Street is a race strip. They shortcut Gisborne Road down through. Even the jumper bars don't worry people in four-wheel drives. And school time in the afternoon, morning, especially in the morning when the mothers are running late going to work. And also the kindergarten there, I think the old house has been there since the late 20s. It was built, 1920s. It was only sold a couple of years ago for the first time from the people that inherited it, and they passed it and sold it. This fella brought it, got this plans done and didn't get it approved, and that's what these other companies trying to do, probably to sell it off quick. I measured the road up in Mason Lane and it's down to about 7 metres, 450 wide now. It's been narrowed. It was on Facebook the other day that Young Street is going to be narrowed because you've got to put the bike ride there and then go into the park to continue the bike ride around to the other footpaths, which they're going to put in their stages of the council's new plans to do. And there's also going to be angle parking. So if that's true or not, I don't know for sure. But it is a racetrack and people in this area are all middle-aged or, like me, retired. And there's plenty of kindergartens around. There's one 700 metres down Young Street. There's another one at Hungry Jack's. You've got another new one at Manningley at the bottom of the hill there, behind the big high school. And all these new houses are being built in the west of Bacchus Marsh, and that's where they should be putting the kindergartens.
Thank you, Mr Veal. Did you have
think-
any other? You are at your 3 minutes.
Well,
I'll just let you wrap up.
Yeah, okay. But there is only 1 or 2 little children that actually walk up our street. And I sit in my dining room and I've got to watch these cars be going in and out of driveways in the morning, 60 or 70 of them, and then the same in the afternoon. My daughter comes 3 times a week to see us. I think all these staff cars are going to be parked out in our street, and I think that's going to be wrong.
Thank you, Mr Veal. Mr Veal, councillors, does anyone have any questions for Mr Veal? Councillor Berry.
Sorry, I put a clapping up.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Now, Mr Neal, you did mention 70 cars in the morning and evening.
The amount of kids that are going to come here, they're all not going to meet 2 or 3 of them and going to send all up in one car. All these mothers will be dropping one child off at a time.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to clarify that was to do with the centre, not with the traffic that's coming from the primary school.
Well, they're coming from Mason Lane and Young Street. They'd be coming from. Cars would be coming, and they go to the state school in the morning, Mason Lane and Young Street, to the school up there, and also to the kindergarten up there. There's also, like, my neighbour, she has a lady come 3 times a week to assist her because she's elderly lady and she's got health care, comes 3 times a week. Every fortnight she has a gardener comes and does her lawns. I think she's going to have trouble getting parking because I don't think these staff are going to all park inside this kindergarten.
Thank you, Mr Veal.
And the truck that goes into that place to unload their or load up their rubbish, he's got to drive in the gate, do a left-hand turn, and then the car parks have been narrowed now, further away from the fence, go closer in, and he's going to have to drive in there, pick up his rubbish, and then back up around the corner out into the street, and he's going to back out blind out onto the road.
Councillor Berry, did you have any other questions?
I have a question for officers. Is that okay to ask now, Madam Mayor?
Might as well.
Thank you. Thanks, Madam Mayor. My question to officers is, do you realise that Young Street is a busy thoroughfare from the from the primary school children, parents in the morning and afternoons of
Yes.
weekdays?
Yes.
I'll just, to officers, the question was, sorry, Mr Veal. Mr Lovell.
Yeah, so through the chair, there are surrounding land uses that do impact on roadways, but you've got to look at the collective effect. What is the collective effect of this proposal on the local road network? And as I said, the evidence produced by the traffic impact assessment and the review of council's development engineers has determined that it will have a minimal impact.
Thank you, Mr Lovell. Any other questions,
No.
Councillor Berry?
Sorry, yeah, could I have a subsequent question? I'm just trying to ascertain, because you did the survey on the 24th of January when schools would not have been open, with still holidays, how does the traffic assessment know that the number of cars that are moving to the primary school in the morning and evening, if it was done on a holiday day?
Sorry, you're talking to me?
No, sorry,
sorry,
for
okay.
officers. Mr Lovell.
Through the chair, when you look at the traffic impact assessment, which was done on the 24th of January 2023, they were looking at things like car parking, number of cars that were parked on street, and that was because at the time they were applying for a reduction in car parking, and they were trying to justify why they believed less car spaces should be provided. Now, the application did change. They are providing all the required car parking on site, complying with the planning scheme. As far as traffic movements, again, it's looking at childcare centres, and we've got a number of childcare centres in residential areas. I think the example was made, we've got a childcare centre under construction in Griffith Street, which is next to a high school, again, which has high traffic volumes with the schools. We've also got a childcare centre under construction at 101 Gisborne Road, which is, again, intersection of Western Freeway and Gisborne Road, which, again, has high traffic volumes. And these land uses, which is a childcare use, are acceptable within a residential precinct.
Thank you, Mr Lovell. Anything
Thank
else,
you.
Councillor Berry?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor.
No? Thank you,
I'd like to
Mr
say one
Veal.
more,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, you can't. You've had your 3
Well,
minutes, and there is a lot of
it's a
people in the
very
gallery, and I must
dangerous
give them.
corner.
Mr Veal, please. You'll have to take your seat. We have a lot of people to get through
okay.
tonight. I'm sorry. I will call Mr Aurora and Mr Mann to the front. Thank you. Do we have Mr Aurora or Mr... Are we both coming in? Sorry, is it Mr Aurora or Mr
Yes, I'm
Mann?
Aurora, yes.
Aurora, thank you. Mr Aurora, you have 3 minutes to speak, and in that
I
time...
won't take much time
Okay.
because
Thank you.
I'm not prepared like the other people. So for me, we are applied for this permits. And as you know, this area is in demand. It's in priority list. If you go to the Education Department website, this area is high priority area. It's in demand for the childcare, and also we have reduced the car space, which has already been told that we have moved it inside, so that the traffic is not. There's no issue with the traffic. So we already done that part where we have reduced the places of the children, and we have just moved the cars parking inside. And also with the general residential, GRZ is already allowed to have the childcare centers. So I don't think so there should be any commercial. So we can apply in the GRZ zone, so which we have done. So that's what it is from me.
Thank you, Mr Aurora. Councillors, do we have any questions for Mr Aurora? Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, Mr Roy, just obviously you've done a bit of research on what's required in the area. If it wasn't to be a childcare centre, what sort of things would you consider, like affordable housing or those sorts of things?
Sorry, I didn't get it.
What sorts of other things would you consider if it wasn't to be a childcare centre?
So main thing is the school's nearby, so that's the good part, because the school is nearby, so people can drop the kids and drop the small kids to the center. That's the main attraction for that area. It's very close to the primary school.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Councillor Tatchell.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor. Mr Aurora, we've seen the objectors come in and did their own traffic assessment. We've had a cancelled traffic assessment. When you started this project, did you do a traffic assessment?
No, I don't know. So we did the traffic assessment. We tried to get the car parking outside, one car park. But then when there were objections came in, we reduced the car space, we move it inside in the area, and we have reduced the places of the children. So we were 84 before, we've reduced to 76.
I have a
Yes, Councillor Tatchell.
supplementary. So when you moved the car parks inside, did you reduce the size of the parks?
Yeah, we reduced
To what?
we reduced the childcare center. We reduced it from 84 places to 76 places. So it's the children have been reduced, not the car park. The children. Actually, it was planned for 84 kids, but now it's for 76 kids.
Right.
So we reduced the places for the kids.
I have a question for
Yes,
officers.
Councillor Tatchell. Yes.
Madam Mayor. So we have two car park assessments. One was done the day, well, 2 days before Australia Day, and then the gentleman did one. It wasn't the Facebook one. It was the other. And I see in the objections, but there was no inclusion of within that objection of what his results were, regardless of whether they could be ratified or not. But of interest, you obviously seen them when you made the decision. So, what did it actually say? Because it's not in the report. This is Mr. Veal's own car parking. Sorry, not car parking. His traffic assessment. So, on the Wednesday, Thursday, and a Friday, I think, Mr. Veal. Where are you? There you are. Was it 3 days? Yes.
Mr Lovell. Ms Lovell?
So with any traffic impact assessment, while a person can take raw data or do their raw counts, we do require traffic engineers to undertake those counts. So it was actually performed, the applicant's submission was done by O'Brien's, who are reputable traffic engineers, but it is very difficult, I think, for a person to actually do their own evaluation without seeing data, without seeing developments in the area and comparing them to what the actual traffic flow is. And it does require a traffic engineer to provide that data.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other questions? No? Thank you, Mr Aurora. You can take your seat in the gallery.
Thank you.
Councillors, we also have 2 written submissions in regards to this application from 2 objectors, one from Mrs Gordon and one from Mr Phil Homewood. They have been provided in your paperwork, and I know that you did receive them, and I will take them as read. So, councillors, you have recommendations in the paperwork before you regarding this report. I am in your hands. Councillor Edwards.
Madam Mayor, I have circulated a proposed motion to refuse the application based on the amenity impacts to the nearby residential properties, the fact that it will create an unacceptable traffic to local roadways, and I don't believe it represents an orderly planning of the area.
Happy to second that.
So we have a motion put up that will that is an alternate motion to refuse the planning permit, moved by Councillor Edwards, seconded by Councillor Dudzik. Do I have any dissent? Councillor Ward. Okay, we will open the debate. Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, councillors, it's whilst this is a permissible use in the area, and there is a significant traffic in the location already. Having visited the site, I feel that there will actually have a significant negative impact on those that live in the immediate area. There is the opportunity to add to what is already a busier road a lot of in and out traffic, which means people are pulling in, pulling out. We also have our main bicycle, cycle track heading down through that area, which then, as you know, when you have cars crisscrossing each other, visibility becomes less. It impedes the ability to people to see, and it's more likely that we could have incidents in that area. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Councillor Ward, as the opposing, you'll have time to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll try to keep it short. I want to agree with Councillor Edwards. It is permissible use, so that's the most important thing for me. I think the applicant's gone to a great deal of trouble to address the concerns. He's amended his plans twice. He's reduced the capacity of the facility, and in doing so, he's therefore reduced the need for additional car parks. I would suggest that the traffic that this facility will generate will be less than the current traffic of the existing uses going on in the area behind the proposed site. I think the bicycle and cycle track, from my personal experience, will be used by many parents on a fine day to get their kids to and from childcare. And most importantly, I note that tomorrow is the opening of the Mattingly Early Years Hub. Until that's opening for next year, we actually had a shortage of childcare spaces in Bacchus Marsh in East Moorabool. So I think that's a very relevant point that hasn't been touched on here, and we're proposing to refuse a permit for permissible use to provide a much-needed childcare space in Bacchus Marsh. So I very much support the application.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Councillor Dudzik, would you like to speak as a seconder?
Childcare is very important, and normally I would support a childcare application. However, I am very aware of the traffic problems around the Bacchus Marsh Primary School area, around pick-up and drop-offs times, and I do agree that this will potentially increase that traffic, and I also am not prepared to support a traffic management study that was done in school holidays. I don't believe that it's valid, and we shouldn't be basing a decision on that.
Thank you, Councillor Dudzik. Is there any other councillors that would like to speak? Councillor Tatchell.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor. One of the great things about the DAC is that we look at it from a common sense perspective, and we have that flexibility to be able to alter decisions one way or another that aren't so black and white. And I know history in this place hasn't been the most popular thing of late, but ultimately this area has had a continuous problem for well over 10 years in terms of traffic, and that's not taking into account the compounding growth we've had in the area. We don't make temporary childcare centres, so the argument that we're short at the moment doesn't allow us to build a brand new facility as a temporary facility. So ultimately it has to be built in the right place for all the right reasons, for the right amount of time, to take up for the right amount of traffic. The area that hasn't been touched on, and it's been a constant bane of our existence in that area, there's been the safety aspect, where we're talking about kids that are walking around this area and kids that are being dropped off. If you look at that area in total, there's probably more juniors around that place at the busy times than anything else. I mean, you can even take into account on Little Athletics Day, the Bacchus Marsh Primary School, where people use it as a bit of a rat run out the back to pick up the kids. Mason Lane has got an enormous amount of traffic problems, and always has. By doing this, we actually exacerbate the problem. And as I said at the beginning of the discussion, that one of the great things about the DAC compared to the black and white world of the planning scheme is you had that flexibility to use the virtual crystal ball and say what's best for the region and the area going forward. And that's where there's times when the planning department and council may not be at loggerheads, but we work under different rules. We work for the people. We work for the people who live in the area, and we work for the potential people that will use that area. So, and that's why you have that flexibility. That's why you have a development assessment, is because you can use a common sense ruler across any one of these documents and put it into the crystal ball of the future and hopefully give a desired outcome for the residents that live in that region. So from where I sit, I fully support the alternate motion. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Tatchell. Is there any other councillors that would like to speak? No. Councillor Edwards, you were the mover of the alternate. I will ask you to close the debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll keep it quite simple. The reality is that when it comes to planning decisions, it's always a balancing act between what's needed within the community and the existing amenities or the uses that currently are in the area. I think in this case, on balance, I think there's a negative impact, a significant negative impact to the local residents that live in that area. I think that the accumulated effect Councillor Ward rightly pointed out, there is a lot of use in that area. A lot of people do travel to Masons Lane. That's hence, we've put in a footpath, riding path, which is going to create even more use. But I think on balance, in this particular case, I think we should refuse the application. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Thank you, everyone. We will now put the motion to a vote. All those in favour of the alternate motion to refuse the planning permit? All those against? It is carried. Thank you. Officers, could we get a copy of the alternate for the people in the room for clarification? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, we'll move on to item 7.2, development of 2 dwellings to the rear of an existing dwelling, 3-lot subdivision and removal of vegetation at 80 English Street, Balan. We have a few speakers to this item and written submissions. Maxine Wilkinson with advocates Lachlan Lindsell, who is online, and no, that was all, wasn't it? Sorry? Just the 2 people. They've registered to speak. Ms Wilkinson, is she in the room? Yes? Just approach. Thank you. You can take a seat. Just turn on the microphone. You will have 3 minutes to speak to the councillors, and then after that time, they can ask some questions.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Dear Development Assessment Committee, I would implore you to reject the current proposal for the 3-dwelling subdivision at 80 English Street, Milan. The site is directly above our house at 31 Simpson Street on an extremely steep slope. The applicant has allegedly been preparing for the subdivision by performing earthworks to change the levels on the site in line with his vision of the subdivision. This has been documented by a concerned neighbour, and in fact these concerns have been passed on to council without investigation. This was prior to our purchase of 31 Simpson Street, so we were unaware of it. The plans passed to council to distribute have been inaccurate and sadly lacking in detail. Our first copy of the plan stated that dwelling 3 was a 2-bedroom when it was actually a 3-bedroom with study. No details of footing, soil testing or engineering reports have been received, yet we are supposed to trust in the system that everything will be up to specifications and our house won't be damaged by soil or water management. We raised these concerns at the mediation meeting. Re-drainage, we can't be sure that the drainage is patent as a result of the existing retaining wall being erected over the top of it. A more realistic, considered and agreeable option is a 2-dwelling subdivision, thus eliminating the need for a large house being placed 1,020 millimetres off a retaining wall that has no certification to prove that it is fit for task if this division proceeds in its current form.
Thank you, Ms Wilkinson. Thank you. Councillors, do you have any questions for Ms Wilkinson? Councillor Edwards.
Not of Ms Wilkinson, but one of officers.
Yes.
Do retaining walls trigger planning permits?
Mr Lovell?
So through the chair, any retaining wall less than 1 metre in height requires no permits at all, and a retaining wall greater than 1 metre in height only requires a building permit through a building surveyor. So no planning permits are required in either situation.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions for Councillor Tatchell?
Yeah, thanks very much. Ms Wilkinson, you spoke before about drainage on that particular site.
Yes.
Did you have a professional have a look at it to get an opinion? Or?
Not as yet. We have had our son, that's Lachlan, who's going to be speaking next for us. It was more that the concerns that our neighbour subsequently posted. I believe you have a letter of hers to read out. So that this has all transpired afterwards. So we just feel that the levels aren't as originally stated, and with measurement to the retaining wall, it isn't. It is over 1 metre in certain points.
Yeah, so my question will be both to Mr Wilkins and the officers. So in terms of the retaining wall requirement for a permit, obviously if we raise the water or lower the bridge, that figure changes. So in terms of the original retaining wall that was being proposed at the beginning, was at base level?
It was in situ when we purchased the property.
Right. So my next question is to officers.
Yes,
The
Councillor Thatcher.
same question, I suppose, is that whilst we would grant a permit, well, we wouldn't need to grant a permit based on the retaining wall size, if the earth was lifted and the retaining wall was then set up to match, that means that it would be infinite in terms of where the wall ended up, depending on how you raise the ground level. So is that part of the report to say what the datum point of the ground level was prior to the request on the retaining wall, or was the retaining wall request put in after the earth was risen to make it higher? It's probably an engineering question.
Mr Lovell.
I'll try to answer it through the chair. As far as, I suppose, one thing you're talking about levels, what are the levels? So it's existing service level. So if they've actually done earthworks on the site, then it would be based on the existing site level, not the pre-existing site level. The question is about this wall, is it greater or less than a metre? You'd have to probably get an engineer or a building surveyor to make that call.
Thank you.
Ms Wilkinson, I did note before that you mentioned, and I was aware that you did only speak for a short amount of time, and you did mention that you would like your son to speak as well. Yes. And because you didn't take much time, I'm happy to let him, add to your 3 minutes if you'd like. But I will finish with some more questions to you, though. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is quite clearly, excuse me, the recommendation we have before us here this evening has 28 conditions. I don't know whether you've had a chance to review those conditions. Do they in any way address the concerns that you believe are adequate? Sorry?
I don't feel they have. When we purchased the block, it had the existing retaining wall in situ. We're now talking about a house, a 3-bedroom house, being let at just over a metre away from that retaining wall. So even if it was fit for purpose as a backyard, it's certainly not fit for purpose to be up against a building.
Councillor Ward, you have a question.
Yes, thanks, Madam Mayor. Just a question for Ms Wilkins. You mentioned, and I do apologise, is it Miss Wilkins? I just can't hear that great from here.
Yes.
Miss Wilkins, you mentioned earlier, and correct me if I'm wrong, I see some of the permits relate to noise controls during construction. Did you also mention concerns about the vibrations and the impact that may have on your property?
I believe we did. It was more about the stormwater, because we're concerned that the drainage there, A, won't be adequate, and B, might have been damaged in the building of the retaining wall, and also the fact that the retaining wall's not fit for purpose, and we haven't seen any engineering specs to show that it has.
Thank you. May I have a subsequent, Madam Mayor?
Yes, Councillor Wood.
Because I do know with constructions that go on to protect heritage listed buildings, there is also not just a measurements done on the sound, but there's also measurements done on the vibrations. And when vibrations hit a certain level, work must stop for 30 minutes just to protect the frames or existing properties. I'm not sure whether that's done so much in domestic work, but I suppose that's a question for officers. Is that something that would normally be considered to protect a property that is so close?
Mr Mazit now.
Madam Mayor, I'm not aware of any requirements in terms of standard building practices, but we can take that on notice.
Thank you, Mr Mazit now. Is there any other questions for Ms Wilkinson? No? Thank you, Ms Wilkinson. I will pass over Mr Linsdale. I am aware that you both registered together, so I will give you a short time to just speak to the councillors and they'll have time to ask you any questions. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you. To whom may concern, as a construction worker, I am deeply concerned by the lack of engineering specifications for the proposed third dwelling at 80 Inglis Street. The upper boundary of 31 Simpson Street is structurally maintained by a concrete retaining wall, and to be placing additional tons of earth moving equipment and pressure as well as an entire house just over a metre away from said retaining wall is cause for concern as to the structural integrity for not only the wall in question, but for my parents' property as a whole. According to the Building Act of 1993, the applicant, the building owner or agent of owner, is required to provide detailed information about the building work to the relevant building surveyor. The building surveyor will then determine if protection work is required. This protection work may include work designed to maintain the stability of adjoining property from damage during building work. Given the lack of contact about protection work, the surveyor has clearly decided that the building going up 1 metre away from the retaining wall is no cause for concern. And to this I would ask, what is this professional opinion based on? Because there have been no engineering specifications provided, no footing or slab layouts, no soil samples or tests, nothing. If this surveyor and the council are so confident there is no cause for concern in regards to the structural integrity of such an important retaining wall on such a sloped block, then why can't they share the detail and documentation that proves this? And if there is and has been no engineering specifications or structural reports at all, then how can the building surveyor be so confident, and why have adjoining property protection works not been undertaken?
Thank you, Mr Linsdale. Councillors, do we have any questions for Mr Linsdale? Nope. Oh. No? Thank you, Mr Linsdale. Okay, I'll call the next speaker, Mr Robert Estelle. He has registered to speak to this item on behalf of Judith Hodgkin. Mr Estelle, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you,
and in that
Chair.
time, thank you.
I represent my sister-in-law, Judith Hodgkin, who's next to me, who abuts the site at 33 Simpson Street. Judith's current amenity will be reduced if the 3-lot subdivision and townhouse development is not done properly and not controlled by sound planning permit conditions. Unfortunately, there are a number of issues with the plans, and professionally I see they're not reliable for council officers or neighbours to assess properly. For instance, an example would be across the frontage of the site. The levels shown on the plans that have been provided to us show a 1.92 metre rise across the site, and it's flat. So initially I looked at that and thought, how reliable is this? The site context plan, for instance, shows a dog leg, and I presume it's in the title, but the fence lines, according to those plans, follow that line. But if you get there, like I did last week, hopped up on the ladder from Judith's front yard and looked along the fence, it's straight. So there are inaccuracies in the plans. The levels along the plans don't recognise that there is a retaining wall there, and I measured the retaining wall at 1.25 metres high at Judith's boundary. I have a plan that I can leave that shows those levels, and it shows the heights of the existing fence on top of the retaining wall still protruding about a metre over Judith's fence. So you can get a feel from those plans whether there's going to be any overlooking issues, but I do recognise that the applicant has dropped the floor level of Unit 3, which overlooks these properties, but and putting in some other controls, but there's still an issue there. From the point of view of similar applications at 4 Fiskin Street a couple of years ago, council approved a similar development where there was an existing house and there was 2 new homes put on there, but the architectural features ended up by council controls to make sure those new houses were similar. In this case, we've got big skillion roofs that are nearly 4 metres above the verandas, and it's like a drive-in picture theatre screen. Judith asked council to defer the application to allow the applicant to provide accurate and meaningful plans so neighbours can properly assess the amenity of the issues, and to confirm that the drainage engineers in their report had used the accurate levels on the site to actually do their design.
Sorry, Ms Estelle, I just need you to wrap it up, if that's all right. Sorry, it's just, I need to be fair to everyone to stick to the 3 minutes. Thank you. Oh, can I just get Mr Estelle to finish? Is that all right? Yeah, that's all right. Thank you, Mr
Yes, look, I'll just finish up by saying that in the mediation meeting, it was made clear to us by the person who's prepared the plans that the levels were the levels that are shown on the plan were the building of the retaining wall and putting all the fill back up the hill to match in. So from our point of view, Judith would like to see amended plans, this matter deferred, so that we can make reasonable assessments.
Thank you, Ms
And
Estelle.
I can leave the plans.
Thank you. Councillor Dudzik, you had a question for Ms Estelle.
Through the Chair, my question for Mr Estelle is, I was trying to follow what you were asking for, and you're wanting to confirm that by drainage engineers that the levels are correct. Is that what you're wanting confirmed?
Right, they've used the correct levels. I mean, if you do a drainage design, you need to use the correct levels of the existing situation at the day the planning permit was submitted.
And a subsequent, was that information requested in your consultation meeting you had?
Yes, we certainly did, and that hasn't come through. One thing did come through, which was good. The level of Unit 3 was dropped by 450 millimetres to try and overcome some of the bulking issues, but by making it, say, a hip roof, you'd drop the height of the roof overlooking Judith's property by 2 metres, because at the moment it's a soaring up sort of skillion roof.
Okay. Yes, Councillor Dudzik.
Can I ask a question of officers?
Yes.
Have we had the plans that they're requesting, and do we have the information from the drainage engineers about the levels? Do we have access to that information now?
Mr Bazout now.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll ask Mr Lavelle.
Thank you. Mr Lovell.
I'm aware that a stormwater management plan was created, and that was the issue during the mediation, that possibly there could be a problem entering a rear easement due to the size of the pipe, but that information has been provided. As far as levels are concerned, now that's something that can be included as part of this proposal, but it's not impacting as far as overshadowing. And with overlooking, which can of course alter, we've actually got conditions 1A and 1B, which are specifically designed to add extra visual screening to prevent overlooking to adjacent properties.
Thank you, Mr Lovell. Councillor Tatchell, you had a question?
Yeah. Might be a governance question. If by some chance this matter was deferred, generally they come back exactly the same, and because that's our process. But if based on the request for a deferral with requirements for extra information in terms of clarification from engineers, is it still within governance rules, based on the fact that it's an engineering requirement, to put that as a complement to the deferral, to make sure it could be deferred? Otherwise it just comes back exactly the same and we're no clearer.
Governance?
So
So through the chair, I think we'll have to take that one on notice and just find that one out, whether that would be, if we're looking at it from an engineering perspective, if we can bring that back in a different format. So I'll just...
Well, supplementary then,
Tatchell.
on that basis, we have a technicality that would force a deferral until we get that information, as opposed to having to defer it based on the information to come in, which on that technicality would allow us a deferral for that information.
Thank
Is
you,
that
Ken.
right?
So through the chair, we can do it if we do it as a resolution. So if we're putting it as a resolution that we're looking for further engineering work as part of that that property, then we could put that as a resolution forward as an alternate motion, and it can come back.
Madam Mayor, I'd shadow that there may be an opportunity to create a motion that may need to be deferred for tonight until later in the evening, so that it'll be complemented with the right requirements within that deferral.
Thank you.
And I'm sure Councillor Edwards is going to tear that to shreds.
Thank you, Councillor Tatchell. Councillor Edwards, did you have...
Councillor Thatcher.
Councillor Tatchell, did you have any questions?
Yeah, I just...
Sorry, Councillor Edwards. Councillor Edwards.
You want to swap seats? We're right. Councillor Tatchell. No, I just have a question of officers, actually. It's in relation to, seeing as a lot of this discussion is around engineering. Planners wouldn't go into the great detail of all the engineering drawings as part of a planning application. Am I correct in stating that? That would be the conveyancing job?
Through you, Madam Chair, a stormwater management plan was prepared. It was assessed by our engineers based on the detail provided. And based on that assessment, I provided feedback to the planners to say that the information is adequate for this application to be supported from their point of view. So that's the information that we've included. If they want more technical detail, that is something that won't be included in this report.
Just subsequent, Mr. Housen, I was talking more around the, there was some comments made in relation to unit number 3 not having where it was built, for example, the engineering. So I'm imagining when you're going to build these things, you have to do soil tests. They'll tell you how deep your concrete flooring is going to be. We wouldn't assess that as part of this application.
Through the chair, so for any building works that require a building approval, there would have to be detailed engineering and building plans submitted as a part of that process. So the detailed plans that are being asked for at this stage would fall under building. Thank you.
It's a little bit chicken and egg, isn't it? I suppose the question would be, keeping that first question on notice that we're going to resolve that. But the second question would be, we have 3 units here, and I did try and understand the actual size of each area that these units are in, because there's a formula for the shadow content that we based on how condensed the development is over the 3 blocks, based on the topography. So I could ask a simple question, couldn't I? So my question would be, putting that all into the bowl of soup, if we take into account the topography, how condensed it is, the size of each unit, and then the overshadowing into the neighbours' blocks, do we actually comply?
Visit now, thank you.
Thank you, Madam. I'll pass that on to Mr. Lavelle.
Yes. So through the chair, and just be aware that Res Code did change in August, so it's now more code-based rather than based on particular things. So things like setback, overshadowing have a particular standard, and this is compliant. So it is compliant with all the standards, and the only one that we've had an issue is with the overlooking standard, which we've addressed through conditions.
Supplementary question, Madam Mayor.
Tatchell.
Because that code would be based on the datum point being the original datum point, not the older datum point, as the contractor has put more earth in there to actually raise the datum point. So has that been taken into consideration in the depth and height?
So through the chair, increases in height aren't going to affect overshading. So we've got an orientation here of a block of, with the rear boundary being to the north, the frontage being to the south, the overshadowing, even with an increase in whether it be soil or even increase if it was, rather than a single story, it was a double story, all the shadow is cast with inside the site in compliance with the standard because of its orientation.
Is there any further questions for either Mr Estelle or officers? No? Thank you, Mr Estelle. Okay, so we have one extra written submission from Ms Julie Dargan, and it has been requested to, because she cannot, she did register to speak, but however is unable to attend. So I will ask Mr Bazout now to read the written submission. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The submission is from Julie Durgan. Here are my reasons which are to be read at a meeting to all attendants in my absence. Number one, I contacted Council in 2022 expressing my concerns regarding the creation of a retaining wall at 80 English Street. I did speak to someone on the phone who assured me that they would come back to the property and check the height as he informed me that an application had not been made, but I assured him that I was definitely higher than 1 metre and that the landowner simply decided to do the job without a permit. I was assured they would contact me with the findings, which they never did. I did try to follow up, but messages were left with no responses from Council. You have too many people leaving. I even was assured someone would get back to me, but found out later the person had left Council 5 months prior. So how do you know if the retaining wall was or not 1 metre? You are simply taking the landowner's lack of due diligence over my perseverance that went unanswered. Now I found out that no one ever went to inspect construction back in 2021, hence why my follow-up phone calls were unanswered. Moving forward to our recent meeting with Council last month, I was given a crazy response that the landowner did not make an application, so therefore I could know it could not have been bigger than 1 metre. We were not in lockdown at the time, but all council workers worked from home and would not venture out to do the job as they are paid to do. I assured someone would come out and address my issues, but complimentary ignored my request. To add further insult, at the top of the retaining wall, a further iron fence has been erected. We were assured a report would be done on the integrity of the retaining wall by the landowner, and the one and only council meeting could have not yet received a copy of this report. Point number 2, landowner at 80 English Street has been using his mini dump truck and brought a load after load of gravel to raise the base of this land. Reference picture 1. I have very grave concerns that the level of the house balcony is going to sit above the level of the iron fence placed above the retaining wall. This raises the house considerably with the bulk of the house and the roof sitting above the top of the trees and will tower over my back garden. Below in picture 2, you can see the cement bollards on either side of the fence is filled with gravel and dirt, etc. This is at the bottom of the back garden and extends back towards the English fence. Previously, this land was greatly sloped in line with our side of the fence. Now it is raised areas approximately ½ metre. So we have a retaining wall built with an increase in the land mass on the adjacent wall, further increasing the weight going onto this wall. We need that engineering report for a true reflection of the integrity of the wall. Point number 4. I have asked Council to conduct a site visit so I can do a visual with them and assurances that the gravel that was brought into be removed before the construction begins. Point number 5. I also requested a shadow assessment from the landowner and how it will impact my land. He has currently shown the shadow assessment on his land, strangely enough. Point number 6. Stormwater drainage documents do not include the stormwater clearance from the dwelling now on site. We need to know that existing stormwater drainage is capable of clearing all 3 houses. Point number 7, why has this not been put to Council meeting when so many of our concerns have not been addressed? Council needs to do its due diligence and stop constructions such as this that have not had dodgy amendments than to get it to the stage they are now. They need to come out to site and inspect it with us and do the job they paid to do, and to be the champion for all residents of Belen and make sure all developments are done correctly. I do not want to be in a situation of sue after damage occur, as we will be suing both council and the landowner as a combined group, disgruntled neighbours affected by this development.
Madam Mayor.
Yep,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Tatchell asked for a question to officers, and then I'll go Councillor Sullivan. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor. Look, the question really is that when we have to read one of these out, I think it would be prudent to introduce some form of redaction. So we're, I mean, if we're going to read the thing out, I don't think we need to be beating ourselves up at the same time. But so I don't think it would be unfair, I don't think it would be unreasonable to actually introduce some form of redaction so we just get the main points across.
Mm-hmm. Noted. Thank you, Councillor Tatchell. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Tatchell and I must be thinking the same. I just don't think these are comments from the resident, and I think they certainly have a point to make, but I think to denigrate our council officers is inappropriate, and that should not be read out at this council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Okay. So that was our last speaker to that item. Councillors, you have a recommendation in the papers before you. I'm in your hands. Councillor Tatchell. And also, sorry, you have foreshadowed as well. I'll note that.
And it was that long ago, I just can't remember that far back. But, yeah, Madam Mayor, look, I'd like to actually defer this item to the end so that we can actually put a comprehensive deferral together to check whether it actually has the capacity to introduce an engineering complement to the motion, because if it's not, I think we'll still need to hear it. And then, because otherwise it just comes back the same, and we'll hear it as is.
I'm happy to second the request for a deferral to the end of the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Dudzik. Yep, okay. All right. Do I have any objection to deferring to the end of the meeting? Councillor Edwards.
Question.
Microphone, Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So my question is, seeing as we keep getting back to the engineering of this retaining wall, the retaining wall would not form part of this application, is that correct? And if it was non-compliant, then that would be a separate compliance issue in its own right.
Mr Lovell.
Yep. So through the chair, being a building matter, it is completely separate to this planning application.
Thank you.
Okay, so do I have any dissent? Councillor Edwards. Councillor Tatchell, you'll open the debate. Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Edwards. I think we've got two issues here. One, we've got a governance issue that we need to have checked out. So our deferral is to put it to the end of the meeting to make sure we work within the governance rules. And I think that's the priority. The second issue in terms of what Councillor Edwards had suggested in terms of the wall, it's relevant to a point, but that's why we need the engineering team. So it's a bit chicken and egg, that if we don't get one without the other, we actually get the answer without the question. And that to me is a problem. So by actually being able to answer the initial question on governance, to see if we could come back with the appropriate reports, that puts us in a far better position to make a conscious and sensible decision based on this application. And there's absolutely no doubt there's some questions around this application. Some of them are engineering, some of them are partial to what was there in the beginning to what was there now. So I think, in fairness to both the applicants and the objectors, I think we need to put all the spaghetti in the bowl and just see where it lands at the end of the meeting. So it's a fairly simple request, Councillor Edwards.
Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, so my opinion on this one is that we can have a debate as to whether this is a reasonable or not a reasonable application, if there is enough justification to refuse it or not refuse it. We've already heard from officers that they don't get the detailed engineering drawings, so I just think we've got a lot of people in the gallery who've come here tonight to talk, and by deferring it, they could be here for another couple of hours without actually us getting to make a decision. So I think if we're going to, if the proposal is to defer this, then we defer it, because I think we're not going to get any more information that I'm aware of that would change what we would argue.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Councillor Dudzik as a seconder. Would you like to speak?
Deferring it to the end of the meeting just gives us the opportunity to get the wording correct, so that what we're asking for in the deferral can be delivered. If we don't get our wording correct, then we're not going to get the outcome that we want, and it's always best to try and get your wording right, and I just think it's fair and reasonable.
Thank you, Councillor Dudzik. Would any other councillors like to speak on the item?
A question, if I may, Madam
A
Mayor.
question, Councillor Sullivan?
So, am I correct in assuming that this will be, the idea is to defer this until after we've dealt with all the other business on the business paper tonight? I guess the question is, what will then come out of that? I mean, are we seeking further deferral, or are we saying requesting additional information back to the applicant for an additional request? Because there does seem to be some conjecture about the heights, the original heights on the site. It just seems to me you need an updated site survey to actually reveal what is there now, because there was some discussion that some of the levels related to a previous levels on site, which what will not be as accurate as what's on site now. So is that what I'm asking the question, is that what we're looking for?
And you asking that to Councillor Tatchell,
Well,
I'm assuming?
through you, Madam Mayor, yes, certainly.
Yes, Councillor Tatchell, would you like to answer those questions?
Well, there's a couple of questions there, and I think Councillor Sullivan's right. But my main objective is that we have a governance issue in terms of the deferral, and it would be unfair on both if we have a governance issue that goes unanswered, putting aside the other issue, the engineering issue, because if we were to make a decision tonight, rightly or wrongly, to approve or not approve, and then we found out later, because that's been taken on notice, that there's a governance issue, I think it could be tested. So I'd rather resolve that this evening and remove that from the equation and get back to the actual application, if that's possible.
Any other councillors would like to speak on the item? Councillor Ward.
I've been listening to the debate and I'm very interested, but I suppose I'm just going back to the general summary, so it's more of a comment. And if Mark's listening, I'll just get him to summarise this for me if I've got it right. Mark mentioned in the report that the development and subdivision meets the standards of ResCo's clauses 55 and 56 of the planning scheme. It's in line with neighbourhood character objective as stated in the schedule and provides for appropriate design responsible minimal off-site impacts, so that's all tick. Proposed vegetation removal will not result in the degradation of the water catchment. So when the site visit took place with the objectors, Mark, were the concerns about this retaining wall and the heights and the engineering concerns raised? And if not, I've got a subsequent question, but if they were raised, how were they addressed on the day? Because they don't seem to have been part of the summary of concerns raised at the bottom of the documentation we have.
Mr Lovell.
So, through the chair, so officers became aware of course, through the objection process. It was also raised during the consultation meeting. But the issue for officers is that we've got to assess it under ResCo, so you are right, Clause 55, Clause 56, and there are no standards regarding retaining walls. So whether a retaining wall gets constructed now or in the future, we have no control, whether it be through conditions or any of our assessment doesn't look at retaining walls. Again, that is a separate process, which is the building process. And that ensures with either building permits and also structural information.
Thank you, Mark. That's an important point to consider. Thank you.
Councillor Tatchell, would you like to close the debate? Or would you like a question
with
first?
The question first.
With the question first.
Why not? Ultimately, and whether it was right or wrong, we were given a picture of the problem that is obviously obtuse to the report, which contradicts the report. Now, I note that our two members that are online wouldn't have access to that. So I don't know how we actually do that. You're not going to be able to see it from here unless you've got. Have you got one?
Yeah, it's been emailed. It's been emailed.
Yeah,
There we go.
So on that basis alone, it certainly asks more questions than answers. So now, do you want me to close the debate, or do you want to answer to that?
You can, well, is your question being answered, Councillor Tatchell?
Well, I don't think so, but
Okay, you can close the debate, thank you.
I don't think it'll ever be answered. It's chicken and egg. So I think whatever we do in this room, regardless of opinions on reports and whether that picture's obtuse to what's in the agenda, whether the information given to the planners is totally correct, whether the retaining wall is at the right height, all that becomes irrelevant if you have a governance question. Because no matter what decision is made here tonight, if it's tested by governance and then we're found not to be using governance in its purest of forms, it'll all come back anyway. So my argument would be that it should be resolved this evening to either reject the application, approve the application, or defer it on the basis that we have information regarding the agenda item that's, that doesn't complement the actual approval, or it's obtuse to the approval. So in that case, the governance question then is, if we are to bring an item back under the current rules, it comes back with, as it sits today in the book. But if there is an opportunity to bring it back with a request for further items, then we've resolved the governance issue and it can be dealt with in a fair and reasonable fashion. So, and I could see Celeste jumping into her skin to tell us the answer to this.
I'll just pass to governance for just one note.
So through the chair, look, we can pass a motion that actually says further investigation from an engineering perspective. So if you want to address those engineering concerns, as long as it's in the actual motion and we resolve it, we can come back with the report with those additional concerns raised in it and answered. So as long as it's in a resolution. Thank you.
Okay.
So, Madam Mayor,
yes.
On that basis, sorry, as a point of order.
No, I just got a question, Councillor Tatchell. So,
yes, Councillor.
but once again, any engineering thing would have to be relevant to the Planning Act because we can only hear things in accordance with the Planning Act. Would that be correct? So we've already heard tonight that the engineering is not, so therefore we couldn't include that as part of a future report.
Mr CEO.
Through the chair, I think it would depend on what the engineering is asking for. You're correct that if the engineering is outside the scope of the planning report, it wouldn't be relevant. I'd have to hear what is the engineering that's actually being asked for, because there's been a couple of things said to this point, and then our planning people would tell us whether that engineering request would be relevant for the planning permit.
Okay. So if there's no other questions, I will put the motion to a vote to defer to later in this evening. All those in favour? All those against? It is one. Thank you. We will revisit after item 7.6. Okay, we will move on to item 7.3. Councillor Tatchell, you have a conflict of interest in this item, and I will ask you to step out of the room. We will get governance to explain to the applicants. Okay. All right. We'll move on to item 7.3, amendment to allow for the addition of manufacturing, storage and packaging of plant-based drinks and the removal of Shed 2 on the endorsed plans at 2830 Old Melbourne Road, Dunstown. We have some speakers to this item online. We have Rachel Weston, together with John Murphy, Ray Barber and Joe Barber, have registered to speak together. Is that correct? Together? Ms Weston, will you be speaking on behalf of the group tonight? Oh, we just need you to put your microphone on. I can see you, but I can't hear you.
Sorry.
Thank
Apologies.
you. Ms Weston.
I will speak, but there might be some additional commentary from a couple of the other members if they feel that I've neglected to add some items, and I'll try to stick within the time limit.
Okay. All right. Ms Weston, you have 3 minutes, and after that, councillors will be able to ask questions to the group. Thank you. Okay, so I think I'll just start with a position statement, which is basically that the location of the current factory has never historically been part of the Dunstone distillery. It was and still is primary farming land sitting above the natural spring on Class 1 agricultural land. So it's recognised as part of the Central Highlands Water Plain catchment as a tributary to Lalal, which was used for drinking water purposes for Ballarat and Geelong. As such, I guess it's our view that the original decision erroneously inferred that the parcel of land was connected to the core distillery site. It's also our view that placing an industrial factory on prime agricultural farming land was undesirable and inexplicable in 2013 and seems more so now, given the strong prospect of future droughts and the fact that during those drought periods in the past, the water has failed and bores have failed in this area. I guess in relation, secondly, to the position of Cottonwood Springs, who took over they applied to Moorabool Council in 2013 and were granted a permit to operate with the permitted use of bottling water and soft drink manufacturing. Since then, they have arguably contravened the permitted use of the site by manufacturing milk-based products, discharged their waste onto the land and water catchment, caused significant pollution and stench across the entire town area, been fined by EPA for not correctly disposing of their waste, and now they seek retrospective change to their permit to include manufacturing of milk-based products. We also note that the applicants have been continuing their activities outside the scope of the original permit approval, with no punitive action taken by council in relation to the waste. And they were fined more than $8,000 by the EPA for continuing to discharge wastewater to the environment. So it's on that basis and background that I refer to our written application that stated our objections, which were that they've been operating outside the permit originally granted and continued to do so after the discovery of their waste discharge. Council compliance has not been enforced. There's historical precedent that the organisation will be able to operate outside their permit, and there's no guarantee for the community, the Dunstone community, that any action will be taken by council in the future. I guess this is a farming community for primary production, not large-scale manufacturing. And I guess the other point is that the legal argument that plant-based products, milk products, are not milk-based has not been tested. And so it reflects the statement that legally plant-based milk is not categorised as soft drink. So I guess otherwise the applicant would really have no requirement to submit this application. So in terms of the final thing that I'd like to say is we're worried about the community here, and that this organisation or operation has already shown themselves not to operate within the permitted use of their permit. And for future, we're worried about the water situation here, and we're also worried about any further building developments on the land. We're quite pleased that there's been a withdrawal for the second shed, but we wanted to say to council that we would be very
disappointed if there was further development on that land, particularly where, as a community, Dunstown is not able to build any further buildings for homes for housing here. There are very strict conditions. We have no water. We only have the tank water here for sewage, the septic tanks. So there's a lot of conditions on the community and the farming community here that suddenly don't seem to apply to the industrialisation of this agricultural land.
Thank
Jo,
you,
is there
Ms.
anything else you'd like to say?
Ms. Weston, I am noting that we are at over the 3 minutes, and you were registered as a group to speak, unfortunately. I will open the floor to councillors to ask questions, though. Councillors, do we have any questions for Ms. Weston or her group? No? Thank you very much for attending online. We will continue through the process, so thank you for joining us. I will move on to the second speaker, who is also online, and that is Mr. John Glossop. I'm just waiting. Mr. Glossop, can you hear me? I think you're just on mute.
I am. Apologies for that.
Thank you. Mr. Glossop, you'll have 3 minutes to address the councillors, and after that they will have the chance to ask you questions, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor and councillors. My name is John Glossop and I'm a Director of Glossop Town Planning. My firm has acted as the town planning consultant for the permit holder and landowner in this matter. As you know, Council issued a planning permit to use and develop the land for industry, comprising a bottling plant for spring water and the manufacture of soft drinks within 2 sheds on the 22nd of May 2014. The permit holder commenced operations within the approved Shed 1 in March of 2021. The app allowed the manufacture of plant-based drinks within Shed 1. Importantly, plant-based drinks include a range of non-dairy plant-based drinks, including oat milk and almond milk. The word milk is used, but these drinks contain no dairy products. Drinks like oat milk are called milk because they have a similar nutritional content to dairy milk. It's important to note that the existing planning permit does not contain any conditions limiting the use of the site for industry or the drink production capacity. This application to amend the permit does not provide an opportunity to revisit the conditions applying to the existing operations on the site, let alone to revisit the approval of the permit. This point has been confirmed in writing by Council's solicitor. What we propose is a small change to the approved planning permit. We simply seek to include the additional description of manufacture of plant-based drinks within the permit preamble. The manufacture of plant-based drinks on site involves essentially the same process that they use to make soft drinks. It is undertaken on the same single process line using the same equipment within Shed 1. The proposed removal of the industrial building marked Shed 2 on the permit will reduce the approved building footprint, and as you've just heard, that was considered to be appropriate by some of the objectors. In relation to on-site wastewater disposal, it's important to note that the site was recently connected to a reticulated rising sewer main, and a trade waste agreement has been entered into with Central Highlands Water to accept the trade waste water associated with the bottling operations on the site. That means that no trade waste water is discharged directly to the land. The application materials demonstrate that there is no perceivable change associated with the proposed additional use for the manufacture of plant-based drinks from the site. An odour assessment confirms that there are no unreasonable odour issues associated with the operation. The application was referred to Central Highlands Water, which did not object, subject to the inclusion of a condition of permit. That condition has been included by your officer. because the site is within 500 metres of land in the township zone to the south, the total beverage production is approximately 50,000 litres a day. The application was referred to the EPA. The EPA did not object to the application. It did not recommend any conditions or changes in hours of operation be included on the permit. Instead, your officer has recommended new management conditions which were not required by the EPA. This is an Australian-owned business that deliberately moved to this area to take advantage of the area's natural spring water. It makes planning sense to allow additional drink production on the site, which already has the infrastructure in place as approved under an existing permit. We say that the amendment will result in no perceivable change in the operation of the site compared to the activity approved under the existing permit. In closing, we simply ask that you approve the amendment to the planning permit. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr Glossop. Councillors, do you have any questions for Mr Glossop? No. Thank you for attending online, Mr Glossop.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Councillors, do you have a recommendation in your papers before you regarding this report tonight? Do I have a councillor to move the recommendation?
Madam Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Sullivan.
Madam Mayor, I have an alternate motion which I understand has been circulated to all councillors. I hope those online have received a copy of that as well. And that the alternate motion really is that Council issue refusal to amend the planning permit to allow the manufacturing, storage and package of plant-based drinks and removal of shed 2 on the endorsed plan. And the grounds, 1, the proposed amendment will increase amenity impacts to adjacent and nearby properties, and 2, the proposed amendment does not result in the orderly planning of the area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Do I have a seconder for the amendment? Yes. Councillor Ward, a seconder. Thank you. Any dissent? Councillor Edwards. I will open the debate. Councillor Sullivan, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This proposed amendment seeks to expand the use for which the original permit was granted in 2014. Natural resources such as spring water, quarries and the like exist where they exist, usually in a farming zone, because the resource itself is of a natural resource and thus exists where it's created. The change sought in this amended permit is to include a plant-based milk manufacturing product, and as Mr Glossop has said, it is a plant-based product and not milk. I accept that, but that the protein value is much the same. But the material itself is imported product. That is, the production could occur elsewhere. Whereas the bottling of the spring water and that occurs on the site, which is perfectly reasonable because that's where the product comes from out of the earth. I think the proposed expansion would undertake, the proposed expanded use could be undertaken at other locations and doesn't necessarily have to occur here. And really, fundamentally then, it is an increase in an industrial use in a farming zone, because the underlying zone in this area is farming. It is not industrial, it is farming. And as such, I think that really we have to consider that. And this is an increment, and I think the proposed amendment is an incremental expansion of an industrial use in a farming zone. And I think we have to be aware of that. And I think as a result of that, it is not orderly planning to sort of make these incremental steps and expand this type of use into a farming zone. So I would commend the alternate recommendation. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Councillor Edwards, as the opposing, you now have time to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There's probably 3 key points for me, and it's the fact that there's significant investment in this process. We ask organisations to come to Mirrabul. We seek that economic development within our shire. We then they come and ask us for an expansion for what I think would still be natural products, just oat milk and things like that. It makes sense to do it in the one location. If we start making organisations move into multiple locations and setting up basically the same factory in two areas to process two different things, we're actually going to drive businesses out of Mirrabul. I know we've spent 10 or 12 years trying to attract businesses here, so I don't think we should be driving them out. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Councillor Ward, as a seconder, do you wish to speak to the item?
No, I declined, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to hear the debate, so I'm interested in other councillors' views. We've obviously heard the passionate views of the objectors and also from the town planner, so it's been an interesting debate, and I just wanted to hear the councillors' views.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Does any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Dudzik.
There were no issues raised from referral agencies, and this report says it's actually a permissible use. I think it's important not to confuse enforcement issues with an actual planning application. Yes, some of the things that have happened in the past were not appropriate and the company could have done better, but this application in itself, I think, is a reasonable application. We do want businesses to succeed. We do want to encourage economic development, and I don't believe we should refuse it.
Thank you, Councillor Dudzik. Any other councillors would like to speak? No. Okay. We will now put the motion to a vote. Oh, sorry, Councillor Sullivan. Sorry, I forgot to
Thank you,
let you
Madam
close.
Mayor. I know we're anxious all to get home, but anyway, the process. I think it's interesting. My colleague raised the question about investment, and I think it is important. We do want investment in our shire and business investment and businesses to come in, but the reality is that they have chosen to do this without a permit in place and now want a retrospective permit. So the question then arises is that how we want to do business? And I think if they had decided earlier on to apply for a permit and go through this process, but they have been manufacturing this without a permit. And the fact that they have chosen to invest funds and money is not a reason for us to say, oh, well, that has occurred, now we'll just rectify the situation. Orderly planning means making decisions, not economic development at any cost. It is the right economic development done through the proper processes in the proper manner. So I think we have to bear that into consideration, and that is orderly planning when you do that. It's not when you seek to just do stuff and then afterwards say, oh, we've invested this money, we want a permit to do that. Is that what we want to be known for at Mirrabul? So I'd ask councillors to consider what is at stake here, and I don't believe this is orderly planning. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan, for closing the debate. We will now put the motion to a vote. So this is for the alternate to refuse. So all those in favour of the alternate to refuse? All those against? Sorry, Councillor Berry. I didn't see her hand, that's all. Oh, she did, okay. All right, so I didn't see it. I'll just call again. All those in favour? Okay, all right, that's what she said. All those against? Oh, I think you need to raise your hand, Councillor Berry, just to be clear. Sorry? Yeah, physically. All those in favour? All those in favour, raise your hand. Okay. All those against? It is carried. Thank you. Sorry?
Madam Mayor, I've been lowering my hand during voting the whole time, all night.
Oh, sorry.
The electronic.
I will call. Yes, call a division. All those in favour stand, please. And Councillor Berry, thank you. All those against, please stand. And as it was a tie, I do have the deciding vote, the casting vote. Thank you. Yes, we can call Councillor Tatchell. Fair enough. We might have a 5-minute break. Yes, we have been going for some time, and we will come back in 5 minutes' time. Should we move? Should we? I'll move. Yep. Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Edwards. All those in dissent? No. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Okay. Councillors, thank you, Councillor Sullivan, for move to resume. Do I have a seconder to resume? Thank you, Councillor Dudzik. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you. All right. We're up to item 7.4. Development of one storage shed and retrospective approval for an existing shed at 25 Abington Park Road, Gordon. We have a number of speakers for tonight, in person and a written submission. I will first call Mr Ferrier to the table. Thank you, Mr Ferrier. Ms Ferrier, you will have 3 minutes to speak, and after that, obviously, councillors will ask some questions. Thank you.
Before we start the time, could I just ask, I did mention earlier that because of the late notice of this, I did ask for a deferral of this matter.
Thank you. Yep. We will still have all the speakers. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. I will rely on councillors having read our objection as it details the impact on the proposal on my family's interests and the community. As a quick summary, approval of this proposal will condemn us to living next to an urban mess that represents a bushfire risk and would enable inappropriate activities conducted that are not in keeping with a rural living zone. I've chosen to focus the rest of my time to responding to the agenda item since I believe it raises new information. The agenda item, or para 1, calls for amended plans to the satisfaction of the responsible authority. What input will objectors have to these amended plans? Information to be included in these amended plans is fundamental. It includes how the cleared land and other outdoor areas will be landscape maintained and used, but that's yet to be defined. How can I exercise my rights in these and subsequent proceedings without this information? Council is required to consider the Victorian planning provisions and give particular attention to the planning policy framework and the municipal strategic statement. I do not believe the proposal complies with clause 15.01-5S, which requires a proposal to respect the existing neighbourhood character. Council says that the sheds must not be used for commercial and industrial purposes to the satisfaction of the responsible authority. These speedway cars are not on the scale of a hobby, as I've explained in my objection. What would Council allow? What is an industrial purpose? A reference I've found defines it as the use of land, building or structure for construction, warehousing, manufacturing, processing or assembly of materials to finished products or byproducts, including the storage of such materials and products. The works that I have seen with these speedway cars would certainly fit this description. Condition 4 requires a revegetation of recently cleared areas within 12 months of the issue of a planning permit and to the satisfaction of the responsible authority. How can recently cleared areas where Council recommends approving the sheds be revegetated? Why should the applicant have 12 months to do this? If this doesn't occur, what steps can Council then take to ensure revegetation? I believe instead this should be one of several prerequisite conditions to any building work commencing. Another condition is the establishment of tree protection zones. One purpose is to ensure the safety of trees by preventing vehicles to be parked or stockpiling materials under them. How would these tree protection zones work in practice when concrete slabs and sheds are already within the existing canopy and drip zone of the trees and their root system? CFA advised that permit is not required under the bushfire management overlay, and the shedding size does not trigger a requirement to endorse the outbuilding bushfire management plan because each shed is less than 100 square metres. This is incorrect. The two sheds are joined and the sliding door on the existing shed is on the north side that the second shed connects to, and this provides one big shed with an area exceeding 180 square metres. We have photos showing this. The agenda item includes a statement that an internal referral, Council's development, infrastructure, environmental health have been undertaken with both referrals consenting to the application with conditions. What were the conditions their consent was subject to, because we're not seeing these?
Mr Ferrier, I just note that it's been 3 minutes. I just will need you to finalise your speech. Thank you.
All right. Basically, that did conclude what I wanted to say. As I said, I could talk about the impacts and I could talk about what we sought as a decision that we didn't object to the applicant having the sheds, but we just felt that the way they arrived there, by clearing all of that vegetation and then illegally building the sheds, and now asking for retrospective approval, cut us entirely out of the process of, having an input until now. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr Ferrier. Councillors, do we have any questions for Mr Ferrier? No? Thank you. You can take a seat. I will call the next speaker, Ms Margie Cooper. You will have 3 minutes, Ms Cooper, and after that, councillors will have a chance to ask you some questions if they'd like. Thank you.
The amended PA states that the sheds are not to be used to work on speedway the sheds are to be used to work on speedway cars, which is a hobby. The general summary states sheds are intended to be used for domestic storage ancillary. Discussion states already constructed shed is currently used to store personal goods. Barwon Water, which is point 15, states the buildings must not be used for any commercial or industrial purpose. The definition of industrial purpose is warehousing, manufacturing, assembling of materials, servicing of vehicles, whether small, medium or on a large scale. Photographic evidence was provided to the council reflecting Shed 1 since construction has been used for building and manufacturing and assembling of stock cars. In regards to the bushfire management overlay, it states that there is no overlay required due to the building ancillary to the dwelling having a floor area not exceeding 100 square metres. Now, both sheds joined together, which is established and has been proven, and there's photographic evidence, total 180 square metres. And the framework for Shed 2 is joined to the erected Shed 1, and the concrete slab level is as one. It's not separate for both sheds, from what can be seen from the road. Shed 2 reflects one, on the plans, it reflects one sliding door at the north elevation only. Erected Shed 1 has only one sliding door on the north elevation. There are no doors on the east or west elevation of currently built Shed 1, nor on the plans submitted. The plans are of concern because on the plans there is no distance defined between either of the sheds. They're right on top of each other, which opens the door for it to turn into one large shed. And the way it sits currently, if Shed 2 is built as a separate shed, then there's no access to Shed 1 because it's blocking the access, and there's nothing on the plans to show that there will be doors put on the existing shed to allow access. Based on previous history, the original permit application stated sheds were for farming equipment storage, which was challenged and then amended. I have no doubt that these two sheds will eventually end up with one if the permit's granted based on the plans submitted and if the frames remain joined. I actually have no issue with the applicant building a shed or even building a large shed, say, for example, 12 metres by 15 metres. But the applications haven't had a lot of integrity, and I think that it's important that the responsible authorities can decide on a submission which will not be altered or changed in the future, and the purpose of the shed is what it's stated for on the application. So, yeah, basically that's it.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Councillors, is there any questions for Ms Cooper? Yes, Councillor Edwards.
Madam Mayor, just one of officers. As part of this process, was the shed inspected to ensure they were separate buildings?
Mr Lovell.
Yeah, so the shed was inspected, so the actual contents of the shed was inspected, so it is being used for personal services, which is those hobby cars. And I suppose that question also about they are two detached sheds. There are separate elevation plans for both sheds with separate walls.
Thank you, Mr Lovell. Councillor Dudzik.
Yes. Is the storage of hobby cars an acceptable use in these sheds?
Mr Lovell.
So we only can take from our observations of going inside the shed. So it is what you would expect typically of a residential property, that a person has, you know, they've got one vehicle under there, they had benches, it's a very small space, and then they had another car which is a hobby car which was disassembled, but it's not like a production line. It's purely, you can tell it's been operated by the individuals in the house, as opposed to running a commercial business or employing people to run a particular manufacturing type operation.
Thank you, Mr Lovell. Any other questions for officers or Ms Cooper? No. Thank you, Ms Cooper. You can return to the gallery. Our third speaker for this item tonight, Mr Ken Hutchins. Mr Hutchins, would you like to take the chair, please? Mr Hutchins, you will have 3 minutes to speak, and after that, councillors will be able to ask you questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Speedway is a hobby of mine. I've been doing it for a lot of years, and that's what the purpose of the shed's for, is for me to work on my cars. I apologise, I should have got a permit to before I built the first shed, so that way people could have done what they wanted to do. As for all the conditions you've put on me doing the shed, I'm more than willing to do all those. That's it.
Thank you. Councillors, do you have any questions for Mr Hutchins? Mr Hutchins, sorry. No? Nice and quick. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, we have a written submission from Ms Charlotte Harvard. She has provided a written submission which is in your papers tonight, and I will take that as read. Councillors, you have a recommendation in the papers before you regarding the report. Do I have a councillor to move the recommendation?
I'll move it if you like.
Thank you, Councillor Tatchell.
Seconded,
Councillor Edwards. Is there any dissent? No. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Okay. We'll move on to item 7.5, use and development for a dwelling at Spargo Blakeville Road, Blakeville. We have two speakers to an item and a written submission. Mr James Robson has registered to speak first. Mr Robson, you can address council and you will have 3 minutes to speak, and then councillors will be able to ask you questions. Thank you, Mr Robson.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors. We thank council again for the additional time provided to consider this application after being deferred from the August meeting. You will note by the officer's recommendation report, which remains unchanged from the August meeting, and the legal advice we have received from Neil Hayden, that our legal advice continues to be at odds with the advice provided by officers. I understand that the detailed written legal advice which we have obtained has been distributed to you before this evening's meeting. The key issue with this application continues to be the existing road reserve which bisects the subject property and subject restructure parcel, and how that road reserve impacts the proposed dwelling construction when considering the restructure overlay. We understand that council officers have raised no other issues with the proposal in general, as was the case in August. The officer's position continues to be that the declared road within this restructured parcel should form part of the consolidated allotment. Our advice continues to be that the road reserve cannot be included within that restructured allotment, as it is not a titled land parcel. Furthermore, the proponent has sought advice from DECA in relation to the possibility of purchasing the road in order to include it within the consolidated parcel. The return advice is that the state government has no appetite to close, sell or transfer Crown Land Road reserves at this time and is currently not accepting such applications. They've advised that even if they were to accept an application, the process could take many, many years, cost thousands of dollars and would likely be ultimately refused. Notwithstanding that there is a Crown Land Road Government Reserve that is within the proposed restructured parcel Our legal advice remains that the consolidation would not seek to include this road reserve within the plan of consolidation, and that the road reserve is not a titled land parcel. The advice outlines that the plan of consolidation would properly include all of the freehold titles into a single restructure lot, which we say is the very purpose of the restructure overlay. The proposal includes a plan of consolidation where the single lot would be in two parts, with each of the parts to be separated by the government road. We say it is clear that the Moorabool Planning Scheme is directing that the subject land, comprising of the 10 currently separate titles, be reconfigured through a process of consolidation to form a restructure lot to be consistent with the outcome that is sought by the Blakeville restructure plan. Such an outcome will also deliver upon the purpose of the restructure overlay by limiting the number of dwellings able to be constructed at the site to preserve and enhance the amenity of the area and reduce environmental impacts. We say that on balance, the proposed consolidation of the 10 privately owned titles as proposed is an appropriate planning outcome in the circumstances. We say it is simply not possible to include the road reserve within the consolidated allotment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Robson. Councillors, do we have any questions for Mr Robson? No. Thank you, Mr Robson. Our second speaker on this item is Ms Anita Godfrey. Right. Thank you. Okay. Also, councillors, Mr Neil Hayden has also provided a written submission, which are in your papers, which I consider you that you have all read that submission. So, councillors, you have a recommendation in the papers before you regarding the report.
I'd like to move an alternative recommendation of approval, which requires a Section 173 agreement to be prepared, and I believe this is the best planning outcome.
Thank you, Councillor Dudzik. I have a seconder for the alternate. Do I have any dissent on the alternate? Yes, Councillor Sullivan? Okay. Councillor Dudzik, you will open the debate. Thank you.
This is an impossible situation. Multiple titles and a road that cannot be purchased. In reality, the best outcome for the area is consolidation of the blocks, and I think it's unreasonable to restrict the applicant by making it so that their land is worth nothing, because that's exactly what you're doing. If you can't consolidate your land, you can't use your land, what are you to do? It's not a reasonable outcome. So I think that this is the fairest outcome, and I think that, yeah, I think it is the best situation in a bad proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Dudzik. Councillor Sullivan, as the opposing, I will now let you speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a rather vexing issue. Quite clearly, as my colleague has said, the difficulty that the applicant would have trying to fulfil the requirement of the restructure plan is nigh impossible. We've received advice, and I think Mr Robson confirmed that in his presentation, that to be able to attain the unmade government road is nigh impossible because of the current stance of DECA and the government of not sort of wishing to dispose of unused government roads, even a small one like this, even in these extenuating circumstances. I guess my concern is that we would basically be going against the planning scheme itself. This decision is actually ultra vires. And as such, there's a risk, if challenged at some future date, this decision may be overturned and a dwelling constructed may possibly be removed at expense to council because the decision to grant this is made by council. It is with a real heavy heart I sort of go down this path because I don't think I think everyone sympathises with the issue. I mean, if there are other ways to do this, perhaps a planning scheme amendment or some omnibus restructure or something, we do them from time to time, it might fit that. And if it did go to VCAT, maybe they'd make a decision, but the situation, as I see it, being ultra vires, we do put the applicant and council at risk going forward. So hence my concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Councillor Tatchell is the seconder. Would you like to speak?
I love that word, ultra-virus. The first time I was using it about 12 years ago. I had to go look it up. And it still makes no bloody sense to me today. I don't know how many times I read that word, I think, geez, you could use that anywhere. But quintessentially, this is why the DAC was formed. This is what it's all about. This thing tonight is a test of the DAC. This is the real test of why we went from a basic council meeting where we come in, a proposal was put there by the planning officers, and someone would be given a minute and a half to say their piece. No one was allowed to question it, and of course all of us trained planners would put our hands up and vote one way or another with absolutely no idea what we're doing. But this is different. This is really different. Because you're talking about an area that's part of our fabric, it's part of the tapestry of Moorabool, where you got all these pockets of Moorabool that have got special things going. Blackwood's one of them. Lal has its business. Anywhere around it, you'll find it's all different. One of the great things about Moorabool is its diversity. And then hidden down the bottom there, you've got this place called Blakeville, or Hodgeville, as I call it. And they've prided themselves on building their own area that is special to them, that has 5 and 6 generations of history. And to protect that, what they want to do is make sure that they're on properties where they live in that region, their roots, where they come from. It's the Kunta Kinte of Moorabool. It's their roots. It's where they come from. And that's why it's important. And if we break this up, say we knock this back to them, I'll tell you what's going to happen. We're going to have the gypsies. They're going to roll in. The gypsies are coming to Moorabool. They're all going to come down to Blakeville. And this beautiful setting that's been put there for a special reason to develop families and develop good, wholesome, hard-working country people in Moorabool is going to change. The gypsy wagons will come in, mark my words. You keep all those blocks separate and you separate them. When you put those fences up and people have separate titles, the gypsy wagons will come in and all of a sudden we'll see all sorts of operations down there. They'll be growing marijuana, they'll be doing everything. So don't you worry about that. They'll be all down there playing. They'll be all going to Blakeville because that's the best place to be because we're hidden down here. We can have a couple of acres and we can knock up a shed with a couple of bits of corrugated iron, or we might bring the old bike out down from that was back in the backyard at Ringwood and drop her on a paddock and duck up here for the weekends and get on the booze and get our motorbikes out and our cars and put the kids in them and see if we can roll them over. And all of a sudden, that picturesque part of our tapestry has been destroyed because of a simple decision we make at the DAC, because of the black and white version of the planning scheme that says, if you do this, this could happen. Well, bugger me, if we all lived like that, we'd never do anything. I'd rather die doing something than sit around waiting for something to happen. We have an opportunity to consolidate here tonight, to actually keep the integrity of Blakeville in one piece, to allow a Blakeville family to set up and build a home as part of that community. Or our other alternative is to say, well, we'll just stick to the black and white of the planning scheme where the zebras roam, where nothing really happens, but until the gypsies come. And then all of a sudden we'll be back here at the council meeting going, geez, why did we do that? And the word that'll come up, I'll have to go back to the dictionary and go, that ultra-virus, it was all about the ultra-virus. Well, we've just had the bloody virus. I don't think we need the ultra. I'm saying tonight, let's give the DAC its last opportunity before the state government takes it all away from us, to whack one more charge, one more run into the breach. Hey, let's do it this way and protect Blakeville for what it is today. That's what I'm saying, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Tatchell. Is there any other speakers that would like to speak on the item? Councillor Ward.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. That's a hard act to follow. But I'd also I'd like to begin by thanking Councillor Dudzik for putting up the alternate motion, and just thanking James and Neil Hayden providing their advice. Neil Hayden in particular for providing his legal opinion. So Council's faced with, as Councillor Tatchell said, a decision here tonight. We have conflicting legal advice, but we actually have to consider all legal advice we've received. I admire Ms Godfrey and her resilience in this application, because it seemed like it was just an impossible situation. We're saying that under the Blakeville restructure plan, we want to see consolidated lots to preserve and enhance the amenity and protect the environment, which this application does that. But we can't do that because of the paper road that doesn't exist, and we won't let you sell it as individual lots either, because we don't want residential dwellings out in Blakeville. So it was just an impossible situation. So I admire Ms Godfrey because she's gone and done the right thing. She's approached Department of Energy, Environment and Climate Action to see if she could purchase the road. And the advice there was just an example of bureaucracy gone mad, and it's why people get frustrated dealing with levels of government. The state government's advice that potential purchase of the road could be an option. However, it can be lengthy and costly. The road would need to be surveyed, and consultation would then be required with various other stakeholders, including relevant traditional owners who would need to agree to the sale. This process can take several years, and even in the instance where there are no issues to arise throughout the assessment progress, it should be noticed that many sales are currently being denied for no reason. So it's just impossible. It's an impossible situation. So I strongly support this alternate motion, and I believe that actually it achieves what we want to achieve in the Blakeville restructure plan. It will allow us to provide consolidation of the lots in two parts, with each of the parts to be separated by that government road. So well done, Councillor Dudzik, for moving the alternate.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Is there any other councillors that would like to speak? Councillor Edwards.
I think this is an impossible decision, because I don't think there's a councillor in this room that doesn't think that this should be approved, right? And we do have conflicting legal advice. What concerns me at the moment, though, is we do have an Indigenous claim against Moorabool for the Shire, which means all that DELP land is, we don't know what that means for the future. So now we have a road that's managed by, which is owned by DELP, which could end up in a High Court in a claim. This is only recent information we've had. So where does that leave Moorabool? Right? Does it leave us on the cusp of putting ourselves at greater risk? Do we allow VCAT to make the decision and, take the easy way out? I actually don't know. So I'm actually debating against myself as we talk right now, because I don't know which to do this way, because it's a tough decision. I think I've been on council 12 years and it's as tough a decision I've come against. We have a view from our lawyers that says we can't do this. We're not allowed to do it. I agree fully with Councillor Tatchell, so Councillor Sullivan Tatchell we'll call him, that this is exactly what the DAC is for. However, that's to do within the Act, right? And here we're stepping outside of that, which puts us at risk. So with that, I'll probably suggest to councillors that there are a couple of avenues left, albeit that they're difficult, to go through a planning scheme amendment. This needs to be fixed one way or the other in the long term. So I probably would advise that we err on the side of caution for all of the Shire residents. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. So if there's no more other councillors to speak, I will pass to Councillor Dudzik to close the debate. Oh, Councillor Berry, you would like to speak?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I are on the side of what David was saying. Today I've had a couple of conversations with the planners, and it's very, very confusing. Probably the hardest decision. David talks about that his whole life at council. Well, it's been really difficult. I've asked that many questions. As far as the legal side, I err on the side of it not going through, because I'd hate to think that down the track that Moorabool Shire does have a legal case to answer to. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Berry. Councillor Dudzik, you'd like to close the debate.
So this has come for a decision by councillors at the DAC. If we're not able to make a decision, why has this matter come to us? You can't say, here, you must deny this application, but you're making a decision that you agree with. We're not here to be told what to do. We're not here to be a rubber stamp. We're here to listen to the community. And sometimes you have to be brave to do what you think is the right thing. And I do think it is the right thing to do this, and I do think it's a better outcome to have big blocks rather than lots of little blocks, although I do say to the gypsies, you're still most welcome to live here. But I'd say that these blocks are taken. So, yeah, I really do think we've got to do our best thing for residents, and this is what this motion's trying to do.
Thank you, Councillor Dudzik. Definitely a challenging one for all of us. I will now put the alternate motion to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? It is carried. Thank you. Yes. All those in favour, please stand. All those against, please stand. Thank you. Oh. Hang on. Let's call that again. All those in favour? I will just... Councillor Minari, Councillor Dudzik, Councillor Ward, Councillor Tatchell? Yeah. Yes. Okay. All those against? Councillor Sullivan, Councillor Berry, Councillor Edwards. Thank you. Okay. We will move on to item 7.6. Use and development of a rural industry facility, potato processing industry at 12 Aerodrome Road, Parwin. We have two speakers, one written submission from Coral Young has provided a written submission which are in your papers, councillors, and I know that you would have seen that earlier on. We now have Luke Chamberlain online.
Just a question, Madam Mayor. With Ms Young, there was a question asked earlier in briefings whether the objector had removed the objection based on some of the conditions that were put in. Do we know the answer to that?
Mr. Bezet now.
Thank you, through Madam Mayor. She did a written submission requesting the conditions that's proposed to be amended. We had a conversation on those, and if those amendments are accommodated, then she will withdraw her objection. She hasn't done it yet, but she's willing to withdraw her objection on the basis that those amendments be incorporated, excluding the ones where there's a double up of conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Mazet.
So she hasn't formally withdrawn, she's only verbally indicated she's willing to.
Thank you. Okay. We will move to the second speaker online, Mr. Luke Chamberlain. Hello, Mr. Chamberlain. Thank you for attending.
Good evening, Mayor.
You will have 3 minutes to speak, Mr. Chamberlain, and then after that the councillors will be able to ask you some questions if they wish. So I will leave it to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, thank you for having me along. My name's Luke Chamberlain. I'm a town planning consultant at Tract, here to speak in favour of the officer's recommendation and here on behalf of the applicant. First of all, thank you to the very thorough and detailed attention that your officers gave to this application, to Ms Mack and Mr Bezedno in particular and others. This is an application for a potato processing facility in an existing building that requires some amendments and modifications to enable the new use to occur. The site has a history of a rural industry use, mushroom facility previously, which is a business that's no longer operating. As you'll be aware and you would have seen in the officer's report, this site is within a precinct that is designated strategically for employment purposes. This application is faithful to that and indeed anticipates employing some direct 40 staff. Some considerations with respect to the application were primarily in regards to wastewater. In recent times, those queries have been resolved through careful collaboration with your officers. The area is otherwise surrounded by what we would call other non-core agricultural uses. Of course, the aerodrome, there's a motocross, there's rally cars, there's a wastewater treatment facility, and there's a poultry farm. So it's a really convenient clustering of these types of uses. We say that it's entirely appropriate from a planning perspective, and all of the details regarding to its operation have been safeguarded through conditions that have been recommended by your officers. It also supports broader businesses within the municipality, potato growers and harvesters, and there's a supply chain benefit to the region more broadly that this application helps to support. We commend it to you and invite your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Chamberlain. Councillors, do we have any questions for Mr Chamberlain? Councillor Tatchell.
I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Tatchell. Any other questions for Mr Chamberlain?
Officers, if I may.
Yes, Councillor Sullivan, question for officers.
In light of what I thought, Mr Chamberlain was an objector, so I assumed that. Okay.
Sorry.
So if, as per what Councillor Tatchell is saying, to move the recommendation, which would be the notice of the decision to grant a permit, the conversation that Mr Bazudin had with Ms Young, can that be still accommodated if this recommendation goes through here tonight? Because I'm sort of quite keen, if there's a withdrawal of that objection, then we wouldn't be can we do a notice of decision post the meeting to remove the notice of decision, I suppose is what I'm asking. Please.
I'll pass to Mr Bazudin now.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So we've got two objections on record. So Carol Young is representing one of the landowners, and if we accommodate the changes that she recommends, then she's willing to withdraw her objection. She hasn't formally done it in writing as yet, so therefore that objection, in my view, still stands, unless she sends it through in the meantime.
Caitlin?
Thank you, through the chair.
Yep.
So in relation to your question, we can potentially put an amendment to the motion that's currently in front of councillors to include the amendments that were suggested and agreed to by our...
No, I guess I'd like to make sure that we leave here, and if Ms Young does decide to withdraw, we can actually proceed more fully, that's all.
Just one moment.
Can I ask a question?
Sorry, Councillor Tatchell, can I just clarify, are you moving the alternate that is on your desk, or are you moving the recommendation from planners?
Sounds like a very good idea. Yeah.
The alternate or the... So you...
The alternate has the recommendations, including the changes from Coral Young, yes?
So, Councillor Tatchell, you would like to move the alternate?
Yes, yes.
Through the chair, if I could just get some, I just want to give one point of clarification. There's actually two objections, not one objection. So even if Carol was to do that, there's still another objection.
Yeah.
Well, I'll still move the alternate.
Okay, so Councillor... Question, Councillor.
Yeah, so my understanding is the alternate potentially delays the process because we had some recommendations in there that
well, I'll get planners to confirm the question from Councillor Edwards. Mr Bazut now. No. Thank you.
Madam Chair, we had a look at the changed wording again, and we satisfied that if the wording is changed, it will still render the same outcome.
There will be no delay.
No.
They won't have to stop production.
There will be no delay. It's just changing of the wording and the conditions. Yes, Councillor Sullivan?
So this alternate proposed motion is to slot into condition 8 as in our business paper. Is that correct, to substitute?
That is correct.
Okay. So that 173 agreement, yeah, will still, okay, that's all right, just wanted to...
Does everyone understand that the change is only condition 8? Yes, Mr Seah.
Through the Chair, I believe the information that may have been given earlier on regarding the Section 173 potentially delaying the operation is they've actually reread it and they don't feel that that's going to be an issue.
We're
Councillor
confident
Edwards.
or we don't feel?
Would it be prudent to suspend standing orders to have that discussion?
I agree.
I'll move we suspend standing orders.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Tatchell. Any dissent? All those in favour? Thank you.
No.
No, it's not confidential.
So my concern is we were happy to consider
Carried. I'll just note that looks like, have we lost Councillor Ward?
Yes, he has left.
Okay, he's left. All right. So we'll go back to Councillor Tatchell, moving the alternate.
I'll move the alternate.
Do I have a seconder to move the alternate? Thank you, Councillor Dudzik. Any dissent? Okay. Question, Councillor Sullivan? Yes.
Mr Bazudin had
I have
noted.
the mic.
Sorry. Do you want to repeat your question?
Noted there's another. There was indicated to us that there's another objection, and I'm just curious as to what that objection may entail. That's all.
Mr Bazut now, or Mr Lovell?
So through the chair, the second objection was regarding use of the land. So they were concerned about it being used for rural industry. They didn't see this area, again, they were preferring it to be a farming zone property and not any purpose for rural industry.
Okay, so we have a mover and a seconder of the alternate motion. Was there any dissent? All those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to jump back now.
We go back.
Go back. All right, we're returning to item 7.2.
Yes.
I will just... Item 7.2, development of 2 dwellings to the rear of an existing dwelling, 3-lot subdivision and removal of vegetation at 80 English Street, Bland. So, we won't go through all the speakers again, obviously.
No, do you want the motion?
Hang on a sec. Okay. I'll leave it in council's hands for now.
Right. Oh, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Tatchell.
So the motion is that the Development Assessment Committee defer this item to a future Development Assessment Committee meeting so that the request of the additional information can be made for a feature, it must be further instead of feature, but a further survey plan be prepared by a licensed surveyor showing the natural ground level pre-construction, an updated development plan showing finished floor levels to the Australian height datum. So I think that word feature needs to be made for a future, I'd imagine.
Yes, thank you for...
It could be a feature wall, yeah, I suppose. Ah, right,
Oh, it
yes,
is a
of
feature...
course. Yeah,
okay,
of course,
feature
sorry.
survey plan.
Let's stick with the original.
Thank you, Councillor
So as
Tatchell.
not to confuse.
You are moving the alternate. Do I have a seconder for the alternate, Councillor Dudzik? Do I have any dissent? Okay, Councillor Edwards. You are... Dissent? Yes. Okay, we will open a debate. Councillor Tatchell, thank you.
Goodness gracious me. All right. Well, we're back where we started, really. There's a couple of issues here. And there's been a sticking issue both with the objector and indeed the applicant in some respects, because until we received this picture, this one here, which there was absolutely no doubt in my mind that the datum point of this proposal was changed, and that was by introducing more product into the place to raise the level to reduce the height of the retaining wall, which is a very odd thing to do. Realising, of course, that this motion is purely to explain that as opposed to reject the concept of the original application. My concern is that we need that information because when the application was put in, there was nothing changed on the property. But as the process has gone forward to get approval, they've worked within the boundaries of what the planning permit's not required. I know that's a paradox to say that, but that's the reality. So, and we've got, if you look at the objections in context, they're purely about the engineering of this project and concerns with retaining walls in terms of the properties that sit next to it, concerns about the drainage, when we know that the integrity of the base has been altered since the original application. So this is purely to put everyone's mind at rest, to make sure that the people that are living in the properties that surround this particular property can be at ease with what's going on. They're pretty basic questions that were asked, and unfortunately I don't think those questions were answered, and so that's the reason why the deferral's in place. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Councillor Tatchell. Councillor Edwards, as an opposing.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor. Look, my concerns here are that council needs to make decisions, right? That's why we get elected here. So the reality is that if we don't make a decision in a timely manner, that the applicant can go directly to VCAT, and if they go directly for VCAT for failure to make a decision, right, then we lose all the conditions we put in. So we've put a lot of conditions in there, right? We've been able to get a significant amount of change, or officers have, not us in here, this room, but officers done a lot of work in this application. They've got a significant amount of change. I believe that the retaining wall is a red herring, right, that it doesn't fall within this, and I believe we're doing both the objector and the applicant a disservice by deferring it, because what we're actually doing is allowing the applicant to go directly to VCAT. They can ask for all those conditions to be removed, and we know that not all those conditions have come directly out of the Planning Act. They've actually come out of consultation and negotiation. So if we lose that, then the objectors actually get a worst case scenario. The applicant gets a worst case scenario because we haven't made a decision and it goes to VCAT, and we know how long VCAT can take. It can take up to 2 years. So I believe we have enough information before us today to make an informed decision as to whether we approve or disapprove this application. So I rest my case, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Councillor Dudzik, you were the seconder.
The objectors, they raised some valid issues. They had a photo that showed something totally different to what was presented to us in the report. All they asked for was a copy of the plans so that they could assess them, and they also wanted to check some drainage levels. I don't think that's really that unreasonable, and hopefully we can allow the residents to get the information that they've requested so they feel more comfortable with the application. Because it could just be a lack of information, it could be that something significant is wrong, but I think it should be checked.
Thank you, Councillor Dudzik. Is there any other councillors that would like to speak? Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would speak in favour of the recommendation in the sense that it is actually calling for to be deferred, requesting additional information which relates to heights on site. There was some questioning about heights, and I think it's only fair and reasonable that council obtain that information relating to heights on site. As they exist now, there was some conjecture about whether they were before any development, but what we'd need is the AHDRLs of the site as it exists now. We're not talking about drainage, I'm not talking about retaining walls, I'm not talking about engineering or anything like that, just to sort of determine what the RLs of those currently exist on site. And I think on the plan that we did have, I had difficulty trying to read them myself, to be honest with you. I couldn't sort of work out what they were. So I think it's not unreasonable, and true, an applicant can go to VCAT for failure for council to make a decision. I don't know whether we are in or outside that time, but given it'll take you about 6 or 8 months to get to VCAT, I doubt very much someone's going to take us there. As respect to conditions on the permit, when council goes to VCAT, council tenders or pro-offers conditions if VCAT is aligned to proceed anyway, so which I'm assuming that pretty well what we are. So I don't sort of see our position being prejudiced if it goes that way. So I think it's just to get, and I know it was mentioned about the photo that was circulated, but it was a bit ambiguous. It had no reference point. It didn't sort of mean anything really. It's just a photo as such. But so I think this will bring a bit more rigour into the process, and hopefully we can resolve this matter and go forward, and hopefully the permit will issue in due course. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Any other councillor would like to speak on the item? No. Okay, Councillor Tatchell, would you like to close the debate?
Geez, I'm tempted to say what he said, because it's true. I mean, that's a reality. I think, look, on the surface, the application looks fine, but then when you dig deep and you see these changes that have been made over the journey, it certainly has more questions than answers. And I think, as Councillor Sullivan said, to be safe, basically. Why don't we get this information, have a good look at it, and if the objector's right or the applicant's right, at least we'll know that the decision we make in here will be the right decision. So I commend that to Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tatchell. I will put the alternate to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? Thank you, Councillor Berry. All those against? It is carried. Thank you. All right, we will move to item 8, update and trends, issues and other matters. I will ask Executive Manager of Community Planning and Development, do you have any update, issues, trends and matters? Thank you.
No updates, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Bazut. Now, item 9, update on VCAT decisions. Do we have any updates
No
on
update,
VCAT?
Madam.
No, thank you. Item 10, other businesses. Councillors, I will go around the room. Do we have any other business? Councillor Sullivan. Councillor Tatchell.
I wouldn't dare.
Councillor Berry.
No other business, thanks, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Dudzik.
No other business, thank you.
Councillor Edwards. Thank you, councillors. Item 11, date of next meeting. The next Development Assessment Committee meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, the 21st of February 2024. Thank you to all that attended tonight and to councillors, officers, members of the public for attending this event. Evening, I mean. It was an event, wasn't it? So I'll declare this meeting closed. Thank you.